Your zone of genius doesn't mean you only do what you love. It means you know where you're at your best and you design your time so that those strengths shine through most of the time, even while you carry the parts of the job you don't enjoy.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Can't Stop the Growth. I'm Chad Peterman, and today we have a special episode hosted by our COO here at Peterman Brothers, Mr. Andrew Hasty. Andrew spent a ton of time in the educational space and has a ton of insight into leadership, motivation, and helping others learn. We hope you enjoy his stuff from a future leaders session that we run here at Peterman Brothers. Take a listen and let us know what you think.
We're going to keep rolling with 15 commitments of leadership or conscious commitments of leadership. And, after Chad's comment last week, when I set up the notes for gratitude, and I had something about Abraham Lincoln in there, and we had our World War II comments, I was like, man, I should really try to get something World War II related back into the conversation. It's been a while. But then, of course, the next chapter is all about excelling in your zone of genius, like your flow state, like being in the zone. And I think there's just something absolutely morbid about talking about World War II and people and their flow state. So I'm going to avoid integrating that into the topic today. But something that I always struggle with, like being in the flow. If you're a gamer, if you like to game, you can get in the flow pretty easily. Games are built to get you into a flow state. I love scuba diving. It's a hobby of mine that I haven't done in the last 2 years, which is rather disappointing. But the interesting thing about scuba diving is you wear, divers call everything something different. So it's like what you might call like your goggles, a diver calls a mask. And what you might call flippers, they call fins. And then what you might just call a watch, they call a computer. I don't know. It's different, but it's a watch essentially. And the interesting thing about when you're diving is the most important thing you want to pay attention to is your depth, because you'll use more of your air, whether that's a nitrox, which is like a blend where you get even more oxygen into the air that you're breathing in a contained tank. You'll use more of it, whether it's normal air or nitrox air, right? There's two different types that you can dive with. And the interesting thing is you're constantly kind of monitoring your depth, but while you're monitoring your depth, the other thing that shows up on your computer is your downtime, like your time under the water, which is also important. But it's not something you ever really notice or look at. It's weird. It's like, for me, that is, like when I'm scuba diving, it's like, it's such an enthralling experience for me that it's almost like you lose sense of time, right? And I think like I have such a hard time talking to working professionals about flow state, because anytime I think about flow state, the examples I come up with are things that exist outside of the workplace. So I would say bear with me today, because I'm going to try to talk about your zone of genius, accomplishing your flow state at work, and why that's important. The good thing is leaders, it's like the most important thing we can do as it pertains to operating in our zone of genius is helping others find theirs. That's really the goal. But I think the reality is the only way that you can help other people find their zone of genius is you first need to find your own, right? You need to know how to navigate that experience so that you can encourage others and ask the right questions to get there. And, I think it's interesting. It's like, it happens at work, right? Like you've witnessed or you've observed someone that's just like flowing. You've seen it, right? We've all seen it, whether it's during a field observation and watching or observing one of our field professionals talk to a customer, right? You've seen it if you're an install field supervisor and you're watching someone install a piece of equipment and they're just moving part over part. And it's like they are in the zone. It's like we've all seen it, but I don't think that we always do the best job of really identifying it with ourselves and with others, right? It's like we know when it's happening, but we don't name it. And I think the difference between like good leaders and great leaders is great leaders, they're often not only working in that zone of genius, right? They're getting out of their zone of competence and of excellence, and they're tapping into the zone of genius. But I will say, like, one of the difficulties that I have with talking about this topic is like, you're not going to operate in your zone of genius all the time. There's going to be administrative functions. There's going to be emails. There's going to be things that we all probably don't like to do or don't feel like we excel at them. And I think that that's just the reality of it, right? There's paperwork, there's hard conversations, there's long days. We don't just get to skip the grind for like the things that we enjoy doing the most. So where does all this come from? So there's this book that's called The Big Leap. And there's this person who held a PhD, so they're probably really smart, named Gay Hendricks. And she came out and she said, like, hey, look, there's like 4 zones that everybody operates within, right? And Chad's, message that he sent out, his Monday morning email, talks about operating in our zone of genius. He's starting to align talks each week with the topic for those of you who are starting to see that nested Easter egg there. So there's these 4 zones. There's the zone of incompetence. So think about the zone of incompetence like these are things that other people do better than you. That's your zone of incompetence, right? You typically probably receive negative feedback on these types of things. Zone of incompetence, if there's things that we receive negative feedback on or others do better than us, what we'll get to later is what they say you should do in those situations is delegate. But there's probably tasks that you cannot delegate. So just because it's your zone of incompetence doesn't mean you get to be like, I'm going to delegate hours this week to somebody else. I'm going to have somebody else calculate that. That's not what we get to do, unfortunately, professionally. In our personal lives, as we're trying to find, zones of genius, yeah, you have that luxury. The next one is the zone of competence, which is like, this is something like you're okay at, but like many people could either do it just like you or do it just as well. And it's probably not that satisfying for you. The next one is your zone of excellence. So this is something that you are highly skilled at. You probably even get a lot of praise for it. You're good at it. People acknowledge it. But it just like doesn't light you off. Doesn't get your gears firing. You don't feel a lot of fulfillment out of this thing that you do. You get the positive feedback. You probably do it better than anybody else. And this is unfortunately where a lot of successful people get stuck. They get stuck in their zone of excellence because it still feels like work. If you refer back to like we had the conversation, it feels like months ago at this point where we talked about ikigai, the Japanese concept of like this overlapping sort of your passion versus and what you get paid for and what you enjoy doing and what you bring to the world, and all those overlapping concentric circles is like almost like your vocation, your calling, your ikigai. That's kind of like what I think about when I think about like these zones. It's like finding your zone of genius is like finding the overlapping of all those concentric circles that bring purpose and meaning to your life and that you enjoy doing. So in order to get into the zone of genius, Dr. Hendricks, that's PhD Dr. Hendricks, has this thing that she calls like the upper limits problem. And so it's like thinking of the ceiling above your zone of excellence. There's this ceiling there that's preventing you from being able to operate in your zone of genius. And what she argues is that it's typically fear. It's a fear-based resistance and hesitation that guards the line between your zone of excellence and your zone of genius. And what she refers to as the upper limits problem is this idea that all of us almost has this like gauge, like a thermostat that's inside of us that measures how good we are. And it's almost this like deterministic thing. And there's this limit that says like, that's just shy of our zone of genius that says you're just good enough. You're right there. You're just good enough. And she says there's like 4 reasons we do this to ourselves. We do it to ourselves because we believe that we're fundamentally flawed, which is kind of sad, right? That's someone who just thinks that something is inherently wrong with them. The other reason she says is disloyalty and abandonment. She says for those of us who have more humble beginnings, we cannot express the full extent of success and operate in a zone of genius because we would be feeling like we are disloyal to our humble roots. The reason it's good to go through these is because, one, you kind of have to like reflect and think about what are the things I enjoy doing at work? Where is my zone of genius? How do I operate in that zone? But again, remember, as leaders, the most important thing we can do is identify and help others find their own zone of genius. And so that might be people that you work with. there might be people that you lead and manage that feel that they are fundamentally flawed. You know, in the Peterman way training, we talk about being inverse paranoid. We talk about my inner belief prison, right? My inner belief prison is this idea. We talk about, you know, stopping gnats. We've talked about that before. It's the same thing that they've done with elephants at the zoo. They put the chain on the elephant's ankle and it can't move and it walks around in a circle. And by the time it's an adult, it doesn't have a chain on it, but it's been conditioned to believe that it can't do anything. Or sorry, it still has the chain on it, but it doesn't even realize its own strength that it can remove the chain, right? So my inner belief prison is the same thing to me as feeling like I'm fundamentally flawed, feeling that I'm being disloyal, or I'm abandoning the roots, and therefore I don't deserve to operate in a zone of genius. I don't deserve to maximize the level of success that I feel. And by the way, we are Americans, so however you define success is upon you. I think, unfortunately, in our culture and society, living in the United States, that is very superficially driven or financially driven. If you talk to people from other countries, what success looks to them is completely different, right? So maybe that's the good place to start, is like, how do you define what success looks like for yourself? The other one she talks about is more success means bigger problems. So for all my 90s kids out there, that's like very much makes me think of mo money, mo problems, right? Which there's some truth to that, right? There's some truth to the fact that, like, there's more to do. There's more burdens. There's more stuff that people want from you. That can be a defeating feeling that makes me not want to operate in a flow state if I'm going to have to take on more things. And the other one she talked about, which I found extraordinarily fascinating, is outshining. Outshining is when you are afraid of outshining someone else that's important to you, and that might make them look or feel bad, which I find was wild. You know, we work in the trades. I would say one of the things that's pretty obvious to me working in the trades is the level or the volume of female employees that we do not have in the field. I think that's changing. I think in Columbus, Ohio, we have 2 female field professionals, which is super exciting. But something that when I worked in education, that there were more female teachers in middle school than there were male. And one of the things that we had someone come and do a professional development session that she talked about was women are, and I understand being a man talking about this thing, so I'm just repeating something that I've learned. They said that women are more likely to put down other people because they've been guarded against these opportunities. And so they have almost held down other female peer counterparts out of the opposite, not fear of outshining them. Sometimes it's outshining them, but almost wanting to bring them down because it's a law of scarcity where there's not as many people that could get to excel in this zone, and I need to protect this zone for myself. So some fascinating psychological stuff that I think that is in there. And I think the most important thing when you think about operating in your zone of genius is like just reflecting. It's like, do any of those 4 upper limits problems apply to me? Like, what's keeping me from operating in my zone of genius? What's the root of really like what dictates and what's conditions a lot of the behaviors that I have? So I think, again, as leaders, you know, especially in the work that we do, because there's a technical component to the field and the work that we do, and then there's a process, there's a soft skills component to that work. Again, our job is not only to find our zone of genius, it's to help encourage, right, and create a space that empowers other people to find theirs. So why does it matter? Well, shoot, it's like leaders who live in their zone of genius, they just don't burn out, at least as quickly. You're happier when you're operating in your zone of genius. You feel energized. Like, think about that. Like, what's the thing that you've done professionally where you just lose track of time? I'd even say opposite. Who are people that you spend time with that make you feel not energized and make you feel like you're watching the clock? I would explore that just as much as I'd explore the things that make me feel energized, right? What are the things that don't make me feel energized? Who are the people that absorb energy from me? What are the tasks that take my energy? Why else does it matter? Team performance. Teams thrive when people are placed where they excel, right? And they thrive when they're placed in places where they're able to excel, right? Not just the position, but within the position, within the place, they're given the support that they need, right? That's going to enable their success. Retention and growth, right? That's why it's important. Keeping our employees. It costs a lot of money to replace people. And typically people leave when they're unhappy. And remember what we talked about. Typically they leave when they're unhappy with their manager or they're unhappy with the work or both. I mean, we all do the same thing. We all go through the same thing, right? If you are a manager of frontline employees and you're spending all day doing paperwork or administrative functions, but your passion is coaching people, right? And you're missing out on opportunities to coach and to develop, then you're probably not going to enjoy what you're doing. And I would even argue we're probably it comes all the way back to that situational leadership that we talked about months and months and months and months and months ago. When we talked about we're probably setting those fires ourselves. It's like this vicious cycle where we're sitting here doing the things we don't enjoy that are preventing us doing the things we do because we didn't do the things that we enjoyed in the first place. Like, sure, yeah, there's going to be paperwork and yeah, there's going to be administrative function and yeah, there's going to be things that we just don't enjoy. But I think if it's coaching and developing people is where we're in our zone of genius, I would argue your people will be better and excel and they'll get into their own zone of genius, which means you'll have less problems, which means you're putting out less fires, which means now all of a sudden doing the administrative burdensome tasks that you don't enjoy. And also those of you that love doing those tasks and that's your flow of genius, apologies. I'm not trying to put any like negative light on administrative functions. There's people out there that might be your zone of genius and so be it. The idea is that like when we identify what these things are and we spend more time in it, it should alleviate the burden of these other things that we have to do because now all of a sudden they're not something I have to do. It's just part of the comprehensive work of what I need to get through so I can enjoy doing the things that I enjoy, right? The genius zone. The way that I think about it and we talked a little bit about it is like, what activities make me lose track of time? Where do I feel the most alive in my role? Like I'll tell you right now, the most alive I feel in my role is doing our COO town hall every month. It's the most alive I feel in my role. Just knowing like it brings me back to what I enjoyed about teaching, being in front of people who are all in pursuit of something. And education, it's higher learning and understanding. And here I think it's the same. It's just there's also a compensation piece that gets tethered to that, your ability to want to learn and understand and grow and develop. I love being in that moment because it's like we're getting feedback and I get to address feedback. We're getting updates and I get to address updates. But most importantly, I get to acknowledge people who are excelling, people who are successful, and therefore people who are probably spending a lot of their time at their job excelling in their zone of genius. Where do I feel the most alive in my role? What do others constantly come to me for help with? If other people are coming to you for help with something, that's probably something that you excel at and is in your zone of genius, right? Now, the tricky part in all this is I was thinking about like, what about someone who, if I'm a frontline manager, what about someone whose zone of genius is communication, but there's a technical fulfillment to the work they do, right? So it's like if I'm an electrician, my zone of genius is communication. We have some in this company. We have some electricians whose zone of genius is communication. They can persuade, they can educate, they can inform, they can consult. They are great with customers. They do over $100,000 a month in sales. But if they're not getting better at their zones of incompetence or their zones of competence or their zones of excellence, then they're probably not going, like if they can't fulfill being a good salesperson, like, cause they got to do the work. It's the opposite. When we see field professionals that are like, I don't want to sell. It's like, I just want to fix things. It's like, yeah, but you have to like diagnose and then deliver options. And then the customer has to say yes to you fixing it. So they're dependent upon each other. And then building your technical expertise is only going to further develop your salesmanship, your ability to communicate, all those things, they work in tandem. right? And so I think like you're not going to overhaul everything with the people that you work with overnight, right? You're not going to like get everyone to just tomorrow morning start operating in their zone of genius. But it could be like a really basic question during a one-on-one, which is like, what do you enjoy about your job? What do you like doing? Chad and I are opposites. If you haven't noticed that, he loves getting up on Monday morning and coming to work. I loathe it. And it's not that like I just like, I loathe the work. It's just, there's like, I was never one of those people that got to like come on Monday and be like, yes, like a fresh week. Like by Tuesday afternoon, I'm there. By Tuesday afternoon, I'm like, heck yeah, let's go. But like Monday morning, I'm like, the previous week is still sort of like bleeding into my new week. And I'm thinking about all those things. And I'm sort of like brainstorming and action. I'm like planning the week still. I'm not ready to like execute. Yeah, I've never been, and I'm not going to shy away from that. Like I would love to, don't get me wrong. I would love to wake up Monday morning and just be so freaking excited about everything. But I'm not. And so I have some self-reflecting to do to maybe it's the opposite. It's not like I know what about the work that I do that I enjoy, that I feel like I'm in my zone of genius. I think for me, it's the opposite, because it's just as much identifying what those things are as it is identifying what the things are that are dragging you down. What are the things that are preventing me from getting into that zone of genius? It's probably the same reason, like I'm feeling that like hangover effect into Monday, because there's probably something that's bothering me. There's probably something that's burdensome or something that's taking up my time or a person who's draining my energy. That's probably what it is. And I haven't addressed it. And if you're seeing all the intersectionality of all this, it's probably there's some conversations with candor that I'm missing out on. There's probably all these other leadership attributes or techniques that we talk about that I'm falling short of, that's actually preventing me from getting to the place where I find fulfillment and joy. You don't have to do it overnight. I think it starts with some really honest conversations with yourself about like, what do you enjoy about your job? Like, what makes you lose track of time? What makes you looking at your dive computer and there's the time you've been under the water, yet you don't even notice it because you're paying attention to everything else. It's like, what are those things? And I think the beautiful thing about it is over time, you almost get to like re-architect your role. Like, think about that. You almost get to like rebuild what your role looks like, because you get to maximize your responsibilities in that flow state of genius. Again, I'm not gonna sit up here and say like these are dream jobs that have no hard parts to them. I'm sure there's days every single day in the course of our day where we're like, what in the hell am I doing with my life? Why am I doing this? What does this have to do with anything? Man, this is so annoying. Why do I have to do this thing? Why can't this thing just be automated? All right, well, figure out how to automate it. If it's the zone of incompetence and that's something that like you truly have not figured out a way to improve or develop at it, then yeah, figure out a way to delegate it. And I'm not saying you get to just delegate the most mundane tasks that you hate doing onto somebody else. But yeah, there's probably an opportunity to delegate it. If it's your zone of competence, it's something like you're okay at doing, there's probably like a level of automation, right? There's probably a level of outsourcing or automation that you can do for that component, right? And if it's your zone of excellence, then I would say beware of the trap. Because like the zone of excellence it's tricky. It's like a false feeling of fulfillment. It's like I'm doing just enough and I'm really good at it. So I'm actually doing more than enough. I'm really good at this thing. I do this thing probably better than anybody else. Good is the enemy of great. And it's the same with your zone of genius. Like your zone of excellence is your enemy of your zone of genius. It's where we feel really comfortable. It's where we're good at it. It's moving. I don't feel a lot of fulfillment out of it, but I'm really good at it and I'm better than everybody else. So why do I need to do any more than that? And it's that feeling right there that's keeping you from your zone of genius. we were walking over here and I was telling Chad how much of I feel like some difficult topics that I've had to talk about. Like, it's really hard to like verbalize and talk about being in your zone of genius. And so I think like the only way that I feel like I can give you cement sort of feedback or next steps is not only reflect, but ask somebody. Do that today. Just take some time and ask someone and just ask them and say, like, what is it that you think I do that is me operating in my zone of genius? What is it you think that I do really, really well? And it seems like I love it so much. I get so much fulfillment from it and I almost lose track of time. What is that? And then do the same for that person. And then again, I think the beautiful thing about it is you've now unlocked, right, what that thing is, and you're going to start to pay attention to it. You're going to start to like grapple with that thing, and you're going to re-architect your role and figure out how you can accentuate your role to maximize your ability to do those things. And then the most beautiful thing about it is you're going to go through the same thing with the people that you lead, and they're going to become happier. That's the best part. And when they're happier, your life is going to get easier. I just want to end with a couple of quotes here, one from the book and then a different one. Leaders who live in their zone of genius don't just succeed, they inspire others to do the same. That's how we build teams that are not just productive, but passionate, right? It's passion. And then the last thing I want to leave you with is from me directly, because I grappled with this a lot last night when I was thinking about how to articulate this, which is your zone of genius doesn't mean you only do what you love. It means you know where you're at your best and you design your time so that those strengths shine through most of the time, even while you carry the parts of the job you don't enjoy.
Thanks for tuning in. If you'd like to connect with me personally, you can find me at chadmpeterman.com. To see what our team's up to, you can visit petermanbros.com. Don't forget to check out the YouTube channel and consider joining the CSTG Arena. As always, keep growing out there.